Okay.
We got a Zoltar map.
Good. It's more fun that way. Hello, everyone. Welcome to attempt number 3 at game number 1 in week number 4 of our community tournament. And Philithanic seems to be having a bit of an aneurysm over there.
This is ugly. Have you looked at this?
There's fantastic carbon, and there's scavengers available. This is going to be fine. This is going to be fantastic. I mean, I'm going scavenger here every time. You got Bribe Claim, Slowdown Strike, Power Surge, Network Virus, Mutiny, Pirates. It is such a powerful black market. There's amazing carbon available.
Yeah,
I'm all over that.
The ice is on the other side of the map, though.
I don't care. Get teleported. Look, you just get ahead of everybody else, and there is no teleportation, but you don't care because you're just going to kill everyone before you die to life support. That's the goal of this game.
That is true. That is true. We will. Gameslayer is going to go nomad.
I can't really fault you going nomad. I mean, he's also blocking. Wow, he's blocking the scavenger. I like it. I like it.
Yep. Well, everybody else, good luck finding a founding spot. What do we got? You could found elite over. Wait, can you even fit an elite over there?
I mean, there are a couple spots where you can use basalt to get something done for sure. Expansive are available if nothing else. Oh wow, Hydroponos is going to go for the scavenger anyway right now.
Well, Hydroponos is going to split up their carbon production with 2 very highs. Shouldn't be that much of an issue once Gameslayer's block comes out. Pavlos does found 1 expansive up on the top next to a little basalt on a cliff I hadn't identified, actually one of the more large cliffs, so they'll actually be able to build buildings. And then Sophie's looking right next to the colony, which is one of the places I was thinking of. Going for
next
a metal
to colony, next to some ice.
Yeah.
Super important.
They're gonna use the cliffs next to them to put their buildings, but that's not too far to ship. Annoying, but not the end of the world.
Yeah, it will be a little annoying, but I think that's the worst of it, is it's going to be an annoyance and not a severe detriment as long as you're careful and you force ship when necessary, because it is probably going to be necessary at certain points to do so this game. We'll just have to see how it pans out. Of course, worth remembering for a situation like that as well, no teleportation available to make it a little bit easier.
Right, everybody's on HQ2 as expected. Gameslayer is first to HQ2 due to the earlier found and nomads. Pavlos did catch up. Pavlos lagging a little bit behind because they went for 2 basalt platforms early. Slower construction.
And an extra claim.
Slower construction time, but they are pulling in $89 a second compared to Sophie's metal mine. Well, okay, 76. That's about the same.
Yeah, pretty similar for the moment, but of course we'll just have to see how that actually pans out long term. The spread of resources could be a bit more beneficial to Pavlos later on. He's also running a small surplus on iron at the moment, which could be beneficial because iron up at $40 right now. That is not bad at all.
Gameslayer is on HQ3. Hydroponos is going immediately into 2 ion collectors. With all the shipping that's going to be going on in this map, I like the early move into fuel. The only issue is Sophie is also in 2, so that fuel price is probably going to stall for a little bit, at least until more players are on higher HQ levels.
Yeah, Gameslayer also going to establish his fuel production. Shouldn't be any real surprise considering he already had access to a very large amount of carbon. So everybody just kind of getting their, these days, standard pair of ion collectors early. And it'll be interesting. We might have some more ability to work around those this game with 2 of our players already being in a significant amount of carbon, but we'll have to see what they decide to do long term.
Hydroponos moving into what I believe is the first power plant, a gooned geothermal. Only 14k debt to pay off. With power rising, that is looking very achievable. I don't believe anybody else is in power. Or does Gameslayer? Nope, Gameslayer also moving into a geothermal. There's 5 HQ buildings to look at. It's 62% of the way. So power might peak, but I don't think it's going to go down based off of just the 2. We'll need some more players to move in to geothermals, or Hydroponos to claim a second geothermal vent, which is what they've decided to do.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know if you can hear or not because I'm having my first issues in Oh, the last 3 days?
Well,
for network connections right now?
I can hear you. You just sound like you're underwater.
Wonderful. So I'll let you carry on for this time being until they've resolved.
Hopefully Zoltar comes back soon. We do have everybody on HQ3. Everyone has caught up. Let's take a look at the black market. A bunch of bribe claims have been purchased, and we're looking at 2 for Sophie and 2 for Pavlos. So the expansives are both going for bribe claims, going for a longer term game, increasing their advantage, and the quicker factions, the nomads and the scavengers, are not. Gameslayer has 2 glass kilns that are sitting off here doing nothing for want of ice, which he has ice right next to his base. Just needs to transition out of some of this aluminum. She does have 360 in climbing, so that would be a good transition, I would say, to get those glass kilns back on and running.
Yeah, definitely going to be an important thing for him. I'm back now. Nice to see Hydroponos making money from his power. I do find it interesting. This is one of those few IO games where geotherms are actually getting used. I just want to point that out because so often we just see nuclear power all the time. Whenever nuclear power is available these days, nuclear power still seems to be very effective. Gameslayer's got a couple plants down of his own. But the geotherms definitely not causing any problems for Hydroponos. Both him and Gameslayer managed to pay through their debt and make money from some power this game.
Gameslayer does get to HQ4 while the players are bidding on this hacker array. This hacker array, given the difficulties of this IO map, this hacker array might be more valuable than normal, because usually resources aren't too much of a problem on IO.
Yeah, I'm actually
some pirates, some freezes, and you can set yourself up for some nice hacks.
I'm wondering if anybody's going to be convinced by this pleasure dome that looks like an optimization center, but is right next to 2 habitats. I don't really see that hologram panning out super well, but what it can do is nobody else is going to see over on the right-hand side of the screen, oh look, there's a pleasure dome, I need to pay attention to that. So maybe it'll help out. We'll have to see how it actually ends up playing.
It's a way to make your 264 a second last longer, and that hologram wasn't very much. Holograms are only 10k right now, so it should pay for itself. Not to mention you got the only spot with adjacency from the habitats right now at the moment.
Yeah, it does help make it a little bit more resilient to a mutiny in particular, I suppose. If somebody's not paying a whole lot of attention, oftentimes players will be less interested in stealing an optimization center, which costs them money in the short term, than they will be in stealing a pleasure dome that'll help them get up to HQ5 a little bit faster by making them an extra buck. So we'll have to see how it ends up panning out. Hydroponos, both optimization center and a patent lab coming down right now.
All our players have just moved into patent labs at almost exactly the same time.
Making the money. It's time to start turning it into something, I suppose.
Sophie is the first one to research a patent, looking at liquid batteries. I like that choice. Pavlos' patent lab has been frozen. Hydroponos is almost up. We'll have to see what they decide to research. They're not researching anything, optimizing some food though. Finally getting enough money, maybe.
I mean, Hydroponos should have the cash to actually be utilizing both of these. So I want him to be on the ball. There we go. We're going to see synthetic meat and food production out of him. Wow, that's pretty aggressive for somebody that doesn't have access, at least easy access, to ice this game.
Gameslayer is going to lose the race to liquid batteries to Sophie. Sophie is going to beat them. Gameslayer is going to go into some early aggression on Hydroponos, and Hydroponos will probably be able to defend themselves before Gameslayer can get enough cash to buy. I'm quite sure Slayer does not have a lot of cash. He does have that cash tied up in that Optimus patent, which would give him another 13k, and yeah, he sells out.
That was just a little strange to me out of Gameslayer. The only thing I can imagine is that he was sitting there thinking, well, I see other players also have some cash, if everybody's going to dogpile on someone, I don't want it to be me. So maybe just trying to start something against Hydroponos, force everybody to think about defending themselves. Then he can feel a little more comfortable buying that 1 pip and upgrading.
Yep, that is probably exactly what Gameslayer is thinking. So Gameslayer is the first to HQ5. As a Nomad, you don't see... Nomads have a little bit of a harder time on Io than some of the other factions because of the diminishing resources. They don't quite have that bonus, it feels like, say, on Mars.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a difference for the faction there. We've got Gameslayer once again is going to be beaten to another patent, unfortunately, unless somebody does something about this patent lab of Hydroponos. Gameslayer just sitting there wasting one of his time, wasting one of his tiles so far. Bit unfortunate for him, but good that he's already up at HQ5 because I'm not seeing really any other advantages for him so far this game.
Well, Pavlos is also going to lose the race to synthetic meat.
Mm-hmm. He did, however, get virtual reality picked up earlier, which should be a nice big red flag to everyone that maybe there's a pleasure dome I should be looking for this game. Spy's only at 6k, and you can always just try tossing a mutiny on the optimization center and seeing what happens. So we'll have to see how everybody reacts to that.
That is one really nice pleasure dome, 468 a second. And that's only going to climb as Hydroponos and Pavlos upgrade to HQ5, bringing the demand for the pleasure dome at the highest that it will be.
Yeah, definitely worth paying attention to the fact that there are no robotic factions, there are no scientists in this game, so you're having a decent push on that pleasure dome, even just from the factions we have with a couple of expansive players. And even with the small number of habitats, that is still a very, very nice building to have available, and it's definitely going to be a boon for Pavlos as we move into the later stages of this game. You can see he has an absurd amount of money at this point, can easily upgrade and still be competitive with all these other players. He's going to want to get that done soon.
Right. Pavlos did win that optimization center for 18k. Seems like a fair price, although it might have been, should have been bidded up just a little bit more, as
Feels
we
pretty
still
cheap to
have lots of high prices on the board. And with nobody founding as elite, those high prices will probably stick around for a while.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you're talking about IO, right? An extra optimization center. Now, normally an optimization center is a fantastic thing to pick up off an auction pretty much anywhere. But on IO,
it's going to lose again by 1 second.
Oh boy, transparent aluminum, I assume what he was after there.
Yes.
It's
Yes, it was. It was so close. He's probably raging right now.
Yeah, that's never a good thing to have happen to Gameslayer in particular. He does not handle that sort of thing well. How's it looking on thinking machines? We've got 71 there. Yeah, he is ahead on thinking machines, thankfully, against Pavlos. So looks like he might finally have something work out his way. We'll have to see how it ends up playing out.
So Sophie has been had ignored power early and got themselves into a little bit of a debt problem, and that sort of spiraled out of control to D debt. Now they're right at the edge of D debt right now. You can see that they paid down 12k. They would get back up into the C bond rating, but that's definitely not, and well, they go all the way up to the B. And I was just going to say something that's not where you want to be, because once you make that payment, you're going to be pretty far behind Pavlos, who is right now in the lead in terms of cash on hand. Although Gameslayer's space elevator, once that's up and running, will make 32k a launch on oxygen. So that cost quite a penny to put up. Somewhere around, I would guess, 120k.
The black market is
Yeah, he did not have transparent aluminum for that. That's definitely worth paying attention to. Glass is quite pricey, of course, and so that was a very expensive building for Gameslayer to aim for. He is going to be relying on these holograms to really help him out. That said, he's got a ton of cash.
That was
and
it.
It's possible that getting these elevators up will work out in his favor.
Early
But I'm
mutiny on the space elevator by Gameslayer, mutinying it before it's even finished constructing. Hydroponos, interestingly enough, decided to go for the space elevator before upgrading to HQ5. Given the really high prices on World, I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, that does seem a bit odd to me. As you say, prices on World are pretty darn high. Extra claims definitely, certainly are valuable. Going to be establishing some ion collectors. Now it is possible that he was thinking, well, I'm already making the resources that I want to be making. I don't really want to get into glass because I can't easily secure silicon. Maybe a similar situation with electronics, with aluminum and carbon already being quite pricey. So maybe it was more of a, yeah, there is stuff on world, but it's not good stuff for me. So I'm going to aim for this space elevator now and see how it pans out.
Yeah, that is a decision that you could make. Now, the only thing where I would go against that right now is take a look at Hydroponos. Look at how much oxygen they are burning to keep these 4 water processors on. Here at HQ5, you can, I mean, it'll be hard to ship that, but you're going to want at least 1 or 2 solar condensers just to keep those profitable water processors from giving insane profit to somebody else.
Yeah. Although there is this advantage, and it's also strange, I think, with the space elevator, because going into the space elevator, I guess he's got food to help out. Now that food has really come under control, he's going to be okay. Doesn't play in as much to the oxygen price as it did when the space elevators were first being established, but also he does have a couple of ice, not an absurd amount of distance away from his headquarters off to the west. So it does feel like it would have been maybe the right call to secure that, give him easier, better access to those resources long term.
That said, Hydroponos does have a cash advantage over everybody else, at least in the short term.
That food boost really helping him out. The synthetic meat there doing good work, making him a lot of cash, and also setting up his space elevators nicely. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Pavlos, interestingly, is floating pretty much everything right now, with the exception of glass and electronics. Let's take a look at the optimization centers of all the players. We have Pavlos with a handful, Sophie with roughly the same amount, but in different areas. Hydroponos only has 3, so lagging behind there, and Gameslayer is in the... well, nope, also with a handful, but everyone is optimizing different resources right now, so that's kind of interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, Gameslayer, I honestly think, has a bit of the upper hand here. He's got the most chemical optimization. When everybody's doing optimizations, those chemicals oftentimes will be quite valuable to have optimized. He's also gone into glass, which I really like, just because almost nobody else is making much glass. I mean, Sophie has got a couple of kilns down, but that's it. He also has arguably, the best access to silicon as the Nomad, we would hope. And so long term, I feel like that's a good decision that's going to make him a lot of cash over the next couple of minutes here.
We do have some space elevators being targeted back and forth, and I believe it is just Hydroponos, which is changing hands constantly. Nobody is interested in targeting Gameslayer's elevator. First of all, it's hologram, so they may not know it exists.
Details.
And he has a second one going up now, too. That one cost, well, once again, a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of that glass, really. That glass is so expensive.
Pavlos is moving into a space elevator, and, well, theirs only cost a little bit under 100k, so 62k less, but, Pavlos also in 3 glass kilns, so probably didn't feed anybody any money. We do have our battle lines being drawn. It is Pavlos versus Hydroponos and Gameslayer versus Sophie.
Yeah, Hydroponos definitely feeling the hurt of the black market. This is one of the things I like about Gameslayer's move of, I'm just going to mutiny this right away, because of course it's an easy way to point to everyone, hey, by the way, there's a space elevator here, and it's not mine, it's somebody else's. Make sure you focus all your attention on that because you know it's there, and then my hologrammed ones are more likely to be ignored, because why do people need to hunt out my space elevators? You already have one to attack, go after that one. It's a really nice, kind of subtler move by Gameslayer to go ahead and get that aggression on early, but it works out very, very well for him here, as his have gone, well, just fine, untargeted this game.
The only issue that Gameslayer is running into right now is due to the high cost of the space elevators. Sophie has all of Gameslayer's stock bought up, and Gameslayer only has 1 pip of Sophie's bought up, and they, for all intents and purposes, have the same amount of money.
Yeah, it is very, very difficult for him now. He's made that large investment. It hasn't paid off yet. And of course, for Sophie in particular, one of the things I liked about Sophie's positioning early was they were really well set up to handle life support in particular. Life support's been bouncing around everywhere, but at the moment, these water processors, they've fallen from what they were at 700 a second, but still 400, even with trimmers, 300 a second. That is a lot of cash when you're going for a buyout and getting very, very close to it indeed.
Yeah, Sophie looks like they'll make the first buyout, and buying into somebody with 2 surprise space elevators that you don't know about, unless Sophie's been paying very good attention to Gameslayer's buildings. This space elevator is disguised as a single glass kiln. Looks a little bit suspicious.
Little fishy, yeah. But not so sure about that one.
Sophie does have the buy as soon as they realize it. And there's
just
that
gotta
button.
make the cells.
So
right,
Sophie
Gameslayer,
is going to be put in a good lead. It's going to be expansive versus expansive. Pavlos is going to make the buy on Hydroponos any minute now.
Which I have to say, I'm not surprised at how these buys are panning out in the late game. As we discussed, IO, you're almost always in a position on IO where resources are going to be very, very valuable on World. That's going to be beneficial to you as an expansive player who just has more claims. When each claim is worth as much as $200 a second and you have 4 more of them than everyone else, well, that ends up being a lot more cash in your pocket at the end of the day.
Hydroponos deciding, well, if I can't win, I'm going to make things difficult for Pavlos. Sold out of one of their shares, and then Sophie was able to pick it up before Pavlos did, so Sophie did not have to pay double for that one share, which gives Sophie a little bit of a cash advantage.
Yep, just a small little boost going that way, which is nice because I think, honestly, Pavlos was getting very well set up to head into the late game. I also like Pavlos' optimizations a bit better. I almost never like to see 4 optimization pips finished, and Sophie's got that in water and oxygen and is heading into it in silicon. It just feels extremely focused, and you can see right now that it's not helping out near as much as you might expect because these water processors, they've gotten a lot of chemicals spent in them, but right now 50 a second, 12 a second, depending on exactly what that price is, between like 20 and 30. Oxygen, similar situation, only 100. The solar condensers not making much for the investment they've gotten. But Pavlos, he's distributed it around everywhere, not near as much investment in any one place, and so he's a lot better set up to shift with the moving prices in this late game. So I still feel like he's got a really good shot here. 2 claims left, though. He should use those.
Yeah, the only faction that should be going for perfect optimizations, unless, you're abusing a monopoly that you created, is the elite, because you get the extra claim. Everybody else should probably stop around 2 or 3. In most
I also want to
games.
point out electronics, by the way, right now. They're pretty darn expensive. I'm just throwing it out there.
They're very expensive, and if you have everything that you need to make, and Pavlos does have plenty of carbon, silicon, and aluminum, you probably should be making those instead of these water processors.
Yeah, the water processors could go away. You could, even if you really needed to, if you were worried about that carbon, get rid of the chem refineries for the moment and maybe move into those electronics long term. It's the kind of thing that could work out well if you've got the electronics upgraded at that point. So we'll just have to see. And here they come down. Not profitable without adjacency, but we'll see what they're like once they're fully
Here's
online.
where Sophie has quite the advantage. Gameslayer, thanks to those 2 space elevators, is earning Sophie 3k a second. Pavlos is only getting 1.2k a second on Hydroponos. Hydroponos did build a second space elevator, which is the sub AI did, which is why that's a little bit low instead of 2k, which is what you'd expect. But this gives Sophie a tremendous advantage right now, and you can see that right now in this 70% of the buyout on Pavlos versus 28 for Pavlos on Sophie. Sophie, despite those quibbles that you were pointing out with the optimizations, looks to be in the driver's seat.
Sub AI is good sometimes, and I mean, when it's already got 2 space elevators online, that's typically exactly how you want to pick up that subsidiary. 96% is what Sophie's got on Pavlos. We are heading to a pretty quick conclusion to this one. I will also point out that Hydroponos his space elevator was still being fought over after he went down. Sophie is going to take out Pavlos and clean up this game, but that was very disruptive to the sub AI getting its economy online. It's something we talked about last week, how sometimes you can focus black market on that building of a subsidiary in particular. It'll be disruptive to them. They won't be as quick getting that second one online, and it ends up drastically harming their economy and therefore the economy of the player who owns them. That's what happened this game, to huge advantage to Sophie. They are going to pick up this win.
Yeah, just look at this balance sheet overview. Almost $500,000 in dividend revenue from Gameslayer for Sophie versus Pavlos. Didn't quite hit 200K from picking up Hydroponos. And then Sophie also was able to use a Offworld themselves, a space elevator themselves more often to get 226K resources. So a little bit better in the Offworld markets there. We can look at the production and sales between Sophie and Pavlos. Just running down the list here. Let's see if anything really stands out. Oh, oxygen.
Yeah, a lot of people very lax on oxygen through most of the game, and that was really a big deal.
Yeah. Yep, we did point out that oxygen was going to be a little bit hard if you found it on the right side of the map. And we can look at Hydroponos and we can see Hydroponos purchased. Where is their oxygen purchases?
319,000.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's not a small number, as it turns out. I mean, kind of a similar thing across the board is a lot of people doing a lot of oxygen purchasing. Nobody had less than 200,000 oxygen purchased this game. Now, some people did sell some back, but in most cases, it wasn't quite enough. Like Pavlos just sold a little more than he purchased. Hydroponos, of course, didn't sell any. Gameslayer sold a lot less than was purchased long term, in part because of those off-worlds. Looks like everybody just disrespecting oxygen a little bit really didn't end up harming them.
Over on the black market side of the equation, Pavlos invested the most into bribe claims, didn't end up helping them, but Gameslayer and Hydroponos both only invested one in a bribe claim. I think after Gameslayer had purchased into Hydroponos and didn't pick up a early majority buy, needed to spend more money on those bribe claims just so they had enough silicon income to handle the diminishing resources. Because otherwise, I mean, how are you supposed to go toe-to-toe with Expansive that are buying bribe claims in the late game?
Absolutely. Super difficult. And of course, an advantage of Pavlos and Sophie founding later was better access to those bribe claims. I believe Sophie actually managed to grab the first one by 10 in-game minutes, so 1 second over Pavlos, but very close indeed between those two players. They picked up a whole bunch of them early, and it looks like by the time Hydroponos and Gameslayer even looked at it, it was just too expensive for them to invest too much into it. Definitely hurting them late in that game.
Yep. There are a lot of little things that players could have done differently in this game, and which is nice on one hand because it means there's plenty of areas that you can improve your game. On the other hand, it isn't so nice because there's no like one thing we could point out and say this won or lost player XYZ the game.
Well, let's see. Hydroponos did pick that fight with Pavlos. That did not end up going his way at all. I understand the decision in the moment, but it just felt like both Gameslayer and Hydroponos were in a position where they did not do enough early on to overwhelm the expansive players, who were always going to be booming more than they were coming up from behind and ending up in a strong position. So you do wonder, both those players, from what I've seen, kind of were not particularly focused with their black market attacks, it felt like. Because you can see that even all of our players kind of distributed black market amongst all their opponents to some degree at least. And maybe from Hydroponos and Gameslayer, they both needed to, it feels like, select a target to take that target down specifically, maybe allowing other players to get a bit more of an advantage than they would have liked, but ending up with a subsidiary at the end of the day, even a majority buy one.
So
maybe that attitude needed to be taken.
I really liked Gameslayer's, like you pointed out, Gameslayer's decision to early mutiny the space elevator from Hydroponos, just so it drew attention to Hydroponos, and we can see, Sophie mutinied Hydroponos 5 times, Pavlos 4 times, Gameslayer 2 times. So, I mean, those 2 mutinies that Gameslayer invested in Hydroponos paid dividends in terms of Gameslayer not being the target of black market. The problem is, good play, wasn't able to do anything with it.
Yeah, just not enough of an advantage as that Nomad. Not enough claims taken. Really, I think just needed to be more patient on the found if you wanted that location. I understand, it was a great location, but it felt like it was almost trying a little too hard to block off that carbon early. Maybe not identifying that, well, there are a couple of locations. This is Io. You can sometimes get away with not having much more than basalt and ice here, because how much more is there really to have?